Singhal, your host of the Thrive in Perimenopause Summit. And here we are bringing to you mind-body medicines for harmonizing your hormones naturally and activating the healer within. And I'm sure that you are taking utmost benefit of the informative talks delivered by our wonderful speakers. Mind it that our bodies are a wonderful temporary gift given to us so that we can experience life on this beautiful planet. So, to have a better quality of experience, it is necessary to take care of your body. And according to our guest speaker, Linda Stephens, our bodies are not failing us. Our lifestyles are failing our bodies. I'm so happy to have you, Linda, with us to talk on pelvic floor, a significant topic which not many people talk about and is unheard by most of us. Yet each one of us suffers a lot in our life for not understanding the importance of our pelvic floor. Even I wasn't aware about it. And that's why I'm looking so much forward to get enlightened on this subject today by you. So without taking more time, let's welcome Linda, who is a pelvic floor specialist trainer, yoga teacher, women's well-being coach and trainer for over 15 years. And she has helped over hundreds of women to understand, adapt to, and love their hormonal bodies. Linda's specialty is in pelvic floor and postural issues, and she utilizes her unique blend of insights, yoga tools, and modern biomechanics. And through that, she's enabling midlife women to shine. So let's hear more from Linda about pelvic floor and what inspired her to focus and work in this unique and uncommon area of expertise. So over to you, Linda.
Oh, Sonal, thank you so much. That's really lovely of you. And it's really nice to be here. So yes, I am very, very passionate about enabling women, especially in perimenopause, to be able to live their best lives and shine. But I believe that when, postural pain, when pelvic pain and congestion, when leaking issues, when prolapse issues start to hamper our best intentions, then we can't shine. You're not going to get somebody who could go for a CEO position going for that position if they know that they have to sit through 3-hour meetings, but thinking, I can't do that. I need to know where the toilet is. The statistics around pelvic floor dysfunction, especially once we start to hit perimenopause, are significant. And I'm talking about 80% of women are going to experience some form of pelvic floor dysfunction in their lifetimes. And that might be just a little bit of leaking every now and again with a sneeze or a bad cough. And that can go right through to quite severe pelvic pain, or maybe pelvic organ prolapse, where the organs start to kind of drop into the vaginal canal and sometimes out. So it's a big spectrum, just like anything. And my passion for this area really stemmed from, my own experiences, like I think it always does. I've got 3 children. I used to work in television. I used to have a very busy career in TV, and I had 2 premature babies very close together, just 14 months apart, and realized quickly that my career and having 2 premature babies were like oil and water, I say. So I realized I had to give up what I loved and what defined me, to be honest, at the time. And it was when my kids were 1 and 2 that I retrained as a yoga teacher. And I found that the yoga philosophies and the attention to the whole body and brain and soul together spoke to me in a way that transformed my life. And then 7 years later, I unexpectedly at 40 got pregnant again, and at 24 weeks went into labor. with my third baby. So full-blown labor, and luckily we were able to stop the labor with anti-labor drugs. I had an operation to stitch up my cervix, and then I was on strict bed rest for 4 months, lying on my left side with my pelvis up and my heart down in order to save the pregnancy. And as you can imagine, in that time, the muscles around my pelvis atrophied. So that means, you know, when we don't move, we lose it. When we don't move it, we lose it. And so everything became very weak. And when I stood up one day very quickly to go to the loo, my pubic bone completely split. Yeah. Your face. Yeah. It was the most horrendous pain. I can't tell you. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I birthed with that condition. So I should have had a cesarean, but I was determined, having had a previous emergency cesarean and then a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. Previously, I was really determined to try and birth vaginally, naturally, and but in doing so, there was a fair bit of damage, and I couldn't walk afterwards. And yeah, so it was an extreme thing. And to be fair, I haven't heard of anyone else birthing with that condition, and I would highly advise not to do that. So I was already a pre and postnatal specialist, and I knew a lot about birthing with extreme conditions. I had already developed my yoga birthing method, and I knew a fair bit about postnatal recovery, but not to this degree.
Yeah.
So that's when I had to, in order to avoid surgery, I had to really lean in to the wise woman in the world who, at that stage, this is 10 years ago now, 11 years ago, who were experts in pelvic health. And Katie Bowman, America, Judith Lassiter, who's an amazing physiotherapist and yoga teacher, and various other sort of biomechanics experts. I followed them, and I put together my own program, and I was absolutely vigilant with doing the exercises. And after a few months, I was walking and then running and then eventually jumping on trampolines again.
Wow.
Yes.
You were very much resilient, I will say.
Well, I was tenacious. I was tenacious. However, this is prior to perimenopause. So here's me jumping on trampolines, thinking I was so great. And then I hit perimenopause, where we lose the elasticity of our muscle fibers, when we start to lose our estrogen. And I was double bouncing my elder 2 kids on the trampoline, and I came down hard, and my bladder dropped. So prolapse of my bladder, cytosol, yeah. And I knew immediately what had happened. And it was one of those horrendous moments where I thought, how could this have happened to me? Like, I know this stuff. I teach this stuff. But what I hadn't appreciated experientially, I knew it intellectually, I just didn't appreciate it experientially, is just how much of an impact dysregulated and diminishing hormones, progesterone and estrogen, especially estrogen, when we come into the perimenopause years, has on the elasticity of not just your pelvic floor, but the muscles inside the pelvis that hold our organs in place. So we have our bladder, and it's supported, and it supports our uterus. And then we have the bowel, and they all snuggle into each other. And our lower back and our pubic bone and our lower belly support the organs. And they have a band of muscle around the organs called the levator ani that support them in place. And then we have the pelvic floor underneath. Now, prior to perimenopause, I had, 5 out of 5 strength in that pelvic floor. I built it up. I was all really good. But the band of muscle had been damaged in birthing already. So it already had structural damage. And then you layer on top of that losing estrogen, so you lose the elasticity of what is there. You start to get, everything starts to just not be as strong, just like we get, you know, start to get sagging around our eyes and under here. Everything just loses that elasticity. Add on top intra-abdominal pressure, so pressure from above when you're bouncing on a trampoline, sneezing or coughing or running, jumping, all of that intra-abdominal pressure downwards. To be honest, you know, now I'm like, what was I thinking? But
a good thing, you know, I started doing trampoline, you know, I think few months before only, and I stopped. But I remember my first session, and I had to rush to washroom because, you know, my underpants, they were wet.
Yeah.
It happened to me.
So after that experience, you know, and then also experiencing, as I'm sure many, you know, of the people who are listening to this have experienced, starting to recognize that the mental issues, the insomnia, the, you know, joint pain, the muscle pain, the arthritic-like pain, the mood swings, the brain fog, the forgetting things, were all linked. The IBS style, you know, symptoms, all of those things were to do with hormones dropping off in perimenopause. So I then went and did a lot more training, a lot more study with Borough Education, who are the world leaders in women's health, training for fit pros like myself. And so, yeah, in the last 5 years, I have really specialized in perimenopausal women's health, pelvic health in particular, because it is nuanced, it is different. Once we start losing these key hormones, it takes us into a whole other level of needing to embrace radical self-care. Radical self-care, not just a little bit, in order for us to be able to shine, to be able to step up and take on the leadership roles that the world needs us to take on. So we actually have to look after the best.
What do you mean by radical self-care, and how do you do that, you know, to strengthen your pelvic floor muscles?
So radical self-care is, in my book, it's an acceptance of the fact that once you're in perimenopause and beyond, we're no longer 20 or in our early 30s, and looking after ourselves by doing daily, like getting into the habit of doing daily movement exercises that, if, you know, depending on what our individual needs are, mental mindfulness work, guided meditations, that kind of thing, so that we just keep the vessel as well functioning as possible, becomes a non-negotiable, you know, as sleep hygiene, getting enough sleep, as does making sure that we have the nutrition that gives us the precursors to the hormones that we can create, you know, making sure we have enough good fats in our diet to create pregnenolone that creates then estrogen and progesterone, making sure we have enough above ground vegetables, enough fiber in our diet to stop us getting constipated, so we don't become estrogen dominant. That's a huge thing. Making sure we're drinking enough water to similarly just make sure that we are able to eliminate the excess estrogen, so our hormones are as balanced as possible. Making sure that we are moving in a functional way, keeping joints and ligaments and muscle fibers lubricated, you know, that motion is lotion idea. So not just linear running or walking, but circular movement that actually nourishes the female form. And then chilling, you know, learning to consciously calm the adrenal system, because I believe that most people, especially after the last couple of years with the pandemic, are in a very adrenalized fright and flight state. So many women, in particular in midlife, are absolutely in overwhelm and exhausted and feel like they're juggling all of the balls. And I always say to women, you know, we're juggling all the balls, and most of them are rubber. Most of the balls, if they drop and they roll away, we can pick them up later. We can afford to, but there are a few balls that are crystal. We can't afford to drop those balls. And one of the balls is our health. And our pelvic health is absolutely, you know, our pelvis is the center of our physical being. Our pelvic health is so integral to everything. And unfortunately, it's not like we can just go, pelvic health, that means doing some squeeze and lift exercises, because our pelvic health,
because that's what comes to our mind. You know, I was going to ask you a question on that, you know, because in my second delivery, doctor told me that, you know, your cervix was torn, you know, when I during delivery, and she put a lot of stitches. So I am wondering, maybe because my pelvic region was weak or my cervix was weak, that's why it happened. Or if I have done something beforehand, you know, some type of exercising or something I would have practiced, maybe this could have been avoided, but I don't know. What do you think?
You know what? I'm a big believer in what's happened has happened. And often what has happened to us has happened for a reason, and it's taken us on a different pathway. And there is no point looking back and saying, what if I mean, what if I hadn't jumped on the trampoline and tried to show off?
But the thing is, you know, okay, so it happened, no problem, whatever has happened, but I'm just wondering what issues it could give me later on if I don't take care of something, or if something is, or if somebody is in my position. And if I know beforehand, then, you know, I can give them these tips so that this thing doesn't happen with them. For that, from that perspective, I'm asking you.
Sure. So, 100% what happens in birth comes back when we're in perimenopause. So most women in perimenopause, when we start to lose our natural progesterone levels and our natural estrogen levels, so from around 40, and it kind of peaks at around 46, 47, 48, we find that especially if we have had pelvic trauma, an extended pushing phase, an episiotomy, you know, cutting of the perineum,
all those things happen,
a forceps delivery, you know, so intervention which could damage that levita ani or the perineum, the actual structure of the pelvic floor, even a cesarean birth where you're cutting through all those layers of the fascia as well as the muscles, all of these things, then we have a, you know, often after birthing, we have a big rise in those key hormones that keep everything working, and then they start to drop off, and women in their mid-40s are like, oh my gosh, you know, I haven't really been leaking like this since after birthing, and now it's all coming back. Or, you know, I just can't hold, you know, when I'm passing wind. Over 50, one in four women are fecally incontinent. So, you know, not just from leaking from the bladder, but also from the bowel. So what can we do? All right. So first of all, you need to understand that there is a spectrum of dysfunction. At one end of the spectrum is that muscles have become too weak. It's called laxicity. Yeah. So maybe after birthing, women find this if they lift a lot of heavy weights, if they have been doing a lot of exercise where there's a lot of intra-abdominal pressure downwards. Just also with age, losing that elasticity, we can have, I'm going to show you with my bicep here, we can have muscles that are just too lax. And if you sneeze and you want that muscle to close so you don't wee yourself, don't pee your pants, well, it's too weak. It just doesn't do anything. Yeah. So there's that end of the spectrum. And that tends to be the stress incontinence. So you go for a run and you're like, oh, crikey, I'm leaking here. Or you sneeze and you wee, or you laugh and you wee, or you jump on a trampoline and you lose your bladder. That's that lack of elasticity, that a lack of ability to close those sphincters. Mm-hmm. But then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is called hypertonia. Mm-hmm. And that's too much tension. Yeah. So a muscle that is too tense, if I'm doing this with my bicep the whole time and I'm walking around constantly tight holding, and a lot of women do this because they are afraid of leaking, so they are constantly holding. Well, that's extremely tiring. So you end up with a very heavy, achy pelvic floor. Mm-hmm. You also end up with urgency issues like, oh my God, I need the loo right now, and urge incontinence, because this amount of tension and stress makes the bladder in particular very irritated, very agitated, because it's constantly being squeezed. The muscle fibers around the bladder are constantly squeezing it. So the detrusor muscles, they're called, of the actual bladder are often in spasm. And so the brain goes, oh, bladder's in spasm, better open that sphincter muscle, and the urethra opens and then you leak. So if we have got too much tension, then if you're sneezing and you need the muscle to close, well, there's nowhere for it to go. You need muscles that can lengthen and strengthen, do both ends of the spectrum.
Relax muscle.
So I have found, especially in the last couple of years, and because, like you were saying, we are so mind and body, we are one holistic being. So much of the stress that is between our ears means that our pelvic floor muscles are clenched, are tight, are knotted together. Just like if you've got a knotted shoulder, you can imagine you do this with a knotted shoulder and it becomes very tense. It's the same thing in our pelvic floor. And so therefore we are getting dysfunction. We're getting a feeling of everything being tight. Often that tightness will also pull organs into that vaginal cavity. So prolapse can happen from too much tension as well as too much laxicity. Laxicity means not enough of that elasticity. So you've got these two ends of the spectrum. So the solution is, there is what we call the golden standard of like a three-pronged approach or multi-pronged approach when you're in midlife. First of all, put some estrogen back into the vulva and the vagina. So our whole pelvic area is very estrogen rich, and in particular a type of estrogen called estriol. And once we start to have our ovaries shutting up shop and we start to lose that estrogen, and we lose 70% between 35 and 50. So prior to actual menopause, we've lost, that's progesterone. We've lost about 35% before actual menopause. And then the last couple of years, when we're actually going through menopause around 49, 50, 51, it just drops off. But still, that loss of estrogen around that mid-40s time means that if we can replace some of it, we can keep the tone of the pelvic floor muscles, the sphincter muscles around the urethra, around the bowel, and also the tone of the vaginal walls. So getting an estrogen cream to put on the outside or put it inside the vagina, or you can get a little pessary tablet, which is a condensed cream, which just goes up inside the vagina and can help the bladder to also just calm down. Both of these create a better pH balance, because a lot of women in midlife start to have a lot more feelings of thrush, UTIs, or the feeling of a UTI, and it just stops a feeling of dryness and itchiness and discomfort. Like I said, it calms the bladder down, and it helps the sphincter muscles. You know, if you think about the urethra, it's a sphincter muscle, and the anus, it's a sphincter muscle. So it helps those muscles stay plump. So they're not all sort of weak and then losing that ability to close properly.
So Linda, is it not going against nature that we are feeding some hormones from outside?
So this is not systemic. So it means it does not go into the bloodstream.
Okay.
It's not going to help your heart. It's not going to help your brain. It's not going to help your bones stay strong. It's also derived from wild yams.
Okay,
it's converted in the lab to be exactly the same molecular structure as the estrogen that our ovaries produce. In the UK, in fact, worldwide, but in the UK, it's regulated, it's licensed, it's available on the NHS. Worldwide, you have regulated and licensed versions of this body identical hormone replacement cream or
I have used that. But I did not use it in my vaginal region, but I have used it behind my neck. I bought one, you know, it's now brand I bought, but it was progesterone, not the estrogen. I mean, estrogen I'm not aware about.
So what you're talking about, the progesterone through the skin, is not something that is recommended by the British Menopause Society or by the NICE guidelines, because progesterone doesn't work through the skin. Basically, it's not, because we all have completely different absorbability through our skin. There is no regulation on how much progesterone you might get compared to what I might get. So the progesterone you can buy through a cream over the internet is not recommended. The body identical progesterone that is available, you know, by prescription from a GP is a micronized version, and it's you take it as a tablet, and it's micronized, and it is body identical. So it's as natural as you can possibly get, because it is exactly the same as the hormones that we produce ourselves. But I'm talking about the estrogen. So estrogen that's taken, that's either put through the skin as a patch or as a spray or as a gel, that's called transdermal, as in through the skin, estrogen, that is body identical. The oral estrogen that we used to take, you know, the old style synthetic oral estrogen, that's not body identical. So the stuff that we can put on the vagina and the vulva,
it's bioidentical.
That's body identical, and only, it's like I said before, it's like having a good eye cream. So while you're using it, you know, the lines go away, it becomes more plump. As soon as you stop using it, you're going to get all wrinkly again. So whilst you're using the estrogen cream or the pessary, it's going to help the pelvic area become a lot more youthful. Basically, it's going to help your bladder function. It's going to help prolapse symptoms. It's going to help comfort if there's discomfort, especially with sex, or just, you know, sometimes just wearing knickers is pants are uncomfortable. So it really helps with that. It does, like I said, it doesn't absorb into the bloodstream, so it's not going to do anything to anywhere else in your body. It's incredibly safe. It's incredibly safe. It doesn't have any correlation with increased risk of any hormonal cancers or with DVTs or anything like that. So it's
is there dosage there, you know, specific dose? I mean, you check somebody's blood report, and from there you come up with like how much you need to give.
No, this is like with perimenopausal symptoms. It's not something that you take a blood test for, because like perimenopause, our estrogen levels are doing literally like this within a day, let alone over a month. So blood tests, especially once you're over 45, don't tell us anything prior to being on HRT, but symptoms do. So if you are feeling heavy in your pelvic floor, if you have got prolapse, if you're leaking, you know, where you didn't before, you're starting to leak a lot more. Basically, I mean, I talked to a urogynecologist a few years ago who just said she wished every single woman from about 42, 43 would start to use vaginal estrogen cream, because it would just stop so many expensive visits to the gynecologist. You know, it would just, it would put, you know, it stops so many avoidable problems. And so that's estrogen cream. You do need to get it prescribed from a GP. In the UK, there is a move through Parliament at the moment to try and get one form of this therapy over the counter, yes, but at the moment it's still GP. And
you can take it any time of your month. I mean, it's not that after periods or
it's nothing. It's nothing. It doesn't. It does not.
Based on your symptoms you are feeling, you're facing.
Yeah. So generally, when women start it, they use it for 2 weeks, and then they will cut down and use it once or twice a week. A lot of women who then go on systemic HRT, you know, taking HRT, so it affects all of the estrogen and progesterone pathways in the body. We've got about 400 different uses for these key hormones in the body and brain. Most women will find that they no longer kind of need the support of that vaginal and vulva cream after a while, because their body has become stronger anyway from the systemic HRT. But the other thing that is not hormonal whatsoever is just using a lubricant. So a lot of the modern ones are made from kiwi fruit extract, completely organic, water-based, and just can provide an enormous amount of comfort. So those two things are things that you can do, which are completely separate from exercise, but really super important. Really super important, and not enough women know about it, and too many GPs incorrectly think that vaginal estrogen goes into the bloodstream and is the same as systemic HRT. It's not. It's completely not at all. If you have no desire to take HRT for whatever reason, you can still use vaginal estrogen totally safely, knowing that it is just skin deep. It will help your bladder, but it's not going to go anywhere else in your body, in your brain. So there's that. And then we come on to the actual exercises and things.
I'm thinking about that.
So let's talk about the laxicity first. When we're doing a pelvic floor exercise, first of all, I'm going to show you in a second how to make sure your posture is good. Because we want our pelvic floor itself to be nice and lengthened out. So if you're sitting there right now, just wobble from side to side so that you can feel the bones under your bum, your sitting bones. And then wobble forward and back so you can feel your pubic bone at the front and your tailbone at the back. Can you feel where the bottom of your spine, if you tuck your tail under, you can feel the bone at the back? And then if you rock forward, you can feel the front of your pelvic floor where your pubic bone is. And then you've got side to side, you've got your sitting bones. So our pelvic floor muscles are attached to these 4 points, like a diamond shape. So when we're sitting well and when we're standing well, our pelvic floor muscles are nice and lengthened out. But if we are doing what so many women do because of society's obsession with looking skinny, suck your tummy in and tuck your tail under to try and make your bum look smaller and your tummy look smaller. Yeah, I call it the suck and the tuck. If that's happening, what happens is your pelvic floor, you know, because it's attached to the front and it's attached to the back, instead of being nice and lengthened out, it's all scrunched like that. And it becomes dehydrated and dysfunctional. Now, the last thing you want to do if your posture is bad, well, I'm going to say bad because I don't want to judge anyone, but sucking and tucking is very 80s. Don't do that anymore. So if you're doing this and you're then trying to do pelvic floor strengthening, on top of that, it's this. You're just creating more tension, and we know that tension equals dysfunction. Tense muscles can't close when you sneeze. You're going to leak yourself. You know, tense muscles can't hold your organs. If you jump, you're going to push those organs down and potentially create prolapse. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm going to show you in a moment how to sit well and how to stand well. But say we were nice, you know, if you just wobble forward and back and you can feel your pelvic floor muscles like a diamond kind of spread out on your chair, then to do a contraction and a lift, this is what it feels like. It feels like stopping yourself weeing at this. Okay, if you just focus on the front of your pelvic floor and you imagine that you really need the loo and you've got to stop yourself weeing, so you want to draw those muscles, draw them in and then up slightly. If there was a hose pipe, it would be like closing the hose pipe and lifting it up and then relax them down. So you squeeze and you lift and then you relax down. And you think about the back of your pelvic floor around the anus, and imagine you're in a lift and there's a lot of people in the lift and you need to pass wind and you can't pass wind. So you squeeze and you lift. Can you feel at the back there, squeezing and lifting, and then release that down again? Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to do those two actions at the same time. So you want to squeeze and lift from the front and from the back, lift up and then relax down. Now, what this is doing is it's also, the vagina's in the middle, it's making the vaginal muscles draw in and up. So you can also think of, you know, if you've ever worn a tampon and the tampon's dropped down too low and it just feels really irritating, and you try and get your vaginal muscles to draw the tampon up. So if you do that now, that kind of action, you'll notice that the front and the back are also lifting up and then down.
How different it is from Kegel exercises?
That is a Kegel exercise.
This is the Kegel exercise.
Yeah. So so that is a Kegel. So what you want to be doing though is not just squeezing around the pelvic floor, not just down here, but it's drawing in and up and then a releasing down. The releasing down is the key bit that a lot of women don't do. They do all this or all this, and they don't release. And it's just like going and not lengthening the muscle. So that means that you're just layering on more and more and more and more tightness. And
so
tightness
Linda, which posture is good? I mean, sitting posture or lying posture when you're doing this?
So obviously lying down is easier because you're starting to take gravity away. And better still is lying on your back and putting your bum up onto a couple of firm pillows, or if you're a yogi, a yoga bolster. So you've got your knees bent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, knees bent. You've got a prop underneath your bottom, underneath your, in particular, the sacrum at the back of your pelvis. Yeah. And so what that's doing is it's taking the weight of your organs off your pelvic floor. So suddenly your pelvic floor, which if you're sitting up, would be holding all of those organs. When you're lying like this, the organs are not. So your pelvic floor has a chance to relax. And then in this position, because we've got gravity working with us, it's a lot easier to feel that drawing in and zipping up and releasing. Does that make sense?
So using a ball is much better, exercise ball, and doing it so that the organ's weight is not coming on the pelvic floor.
If you're new to this, then and you're thinking, do you know what, I can't feel anything, because often women are from the tummy button downwards are pretty much cut off, can't feel anything down there. So if that's the case, get yourself in a slight inversion, head down here, pelvis just propped up by a couple of pillows, knees bent, feet on the ground, and from here, I always say it's like, imagine you have high-waisted tight jeans on, and you're trying to zip them up, but from your pelvic floor, you start with that feeling of lifting up through the urethra at the front and lifting up through the anus at the back and zipping up through the vagina, through your cervix, as if you've got high-waisted jeans on, and zipping right up towards your tummy button. So zipping upwards or downwards, since we're on our back here, and then you're releasing, and then you're
releasing is the important part. Releasing is the important part.
And when you're in that slight inversion, you'll find the release is a lot easier as well. So then you get yourself, so you're sitting, because then you want to be able to make these muscles work with gravity, because this is where we are most of the time. We're standing or we're sitting. And this is where we need to have our muscles functional. So yes, start lying down with your pelvis propped. Yes, great. But then you need to start transitioning to using the exercises sitting or standing, and then starting to incorporate into exercises that strengthen the muscles around the pelvis, like your bum muscles, your leg muscles, your deep core muscles. So it starts to be something you incorporate into all of your exercise. But I want to show you something, if that's okay, now, just with our posture, because diaphragm, our lung diaphragm, so the bottom of our lungs, we have this diaphragm. The diaphragm is what pulls the breath into our lungs. The diaphragm, as well as these muscles between our ribs, called the intercostal muscles. So every time we breathe in, the diaphragm drops down and it pulls the breath into our lungs, and these muscles here, they pull out. So as we breathe in, we get this expansion like a balloon, and as we breathe out, a contraction. Does that make sense? Like that. Now I'm just going to stand up so you can see me. Our pelvic floor and our diaphragm, they are the top and the bottom of a big canister. So all of this area, all our guts and our organs are held within, imagine like a big Coke can, So top of the can is the diaphragm, bottom of the can is the pelvic floor. The front are your deep transverse abdominal muscles, and the back are the extensor muscles. So front and back, top and bottom, and these muscles all work together. They can't work in isolation. So if you're sucking and tucking, we disengage the pelvic floor muscles and we stop this relationship between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. If you're rolling your shoulders and sticking your head forward, posture like this, we literally stop the diaphragm being able to work properly. So that relationship is severed as well. If we are walking around sucking our tummy in, all of the pressure, if you imagine a can of Coke, you squeeze it in the center, the pressure either goes up or down, doesn't it? So in our case, in the case of especially women who've had a baby and you've got a weakened pelvic floor, that pressure is just going to go down.
So prolapse can happen.
Prolapse, exactly. Stress incontinence. Weakness overall. So the way you stand and getting yourself in alignment, so your diaphragm actually sits on top of your pelvic diaphragm and they can work together, is super important. Because every time we breathe in and the diaphragm drops down to pull the breath in, and the intercostal muscles spread out to pull the breath in. What happens is we have a correlating dropping down and expanding of the pelvic floor. If we're in alignment, not if we're not. So if we're in alignment, it goes like that, and then you breathe out, and this area draws up, the diaphragm pulls upwards, and we have a natural sumping, lifting, vacuuming action through our pelvic floor muscles. So they should work like this. With every single breath, we should have a toning through our pelvic floor muscles. But if we're, like I said, if we're sucking and we're tucking, if we're rolling, if we're poking, we destabilize all of that. If we're just breathing up here and not using these muscles at all to breathe, the pelvic floor muscles get dehydrated. They get, they collapse and they become atrophied. So yes, in midlife, we need to think about potential using the estrogen cream to re-elasticize their muscles, potentially a bit of HRT systemically if we want to, go down that route. Yes, we need to think about our nutrition so that we, can create our natural hormones as well as possible. And obviously, like we've talked about before, what goes on in here is really important. So we need to calm this so that the whole area can calm down. But from my point of view, what I teach in particular is how to strengthen the muscles, so that our shoulders sit here instead of there, how to strengthen your pelvic floor, your bum muscles, your deep core muscles, so that we can stand and sit well in alignment, and then learning how to breathe so that we actually use the sorry, that was my chair, not me passing wind. So we actually use the area of our lungs where we have most of the capacity, which is down here at the lower lobes of the back of our lungs. This is where we have most of our lung capacity, not up here. So when we learn to breathe diaphragmatically and slowly, and we do it when we're in good alignment, almost instantly, you can start to get much better control of those pelvic floor muscles. Sometimes it literally is changing the way you stand, the way you sit, being aware of alignment, and just changing the way you breathe. Like learning how to breathe can absolutely transform how our body operates, because we're going back to homeostasis. We're going back to how our body was designed to work. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I have one more question. I mean, when you're sitting on chair, so how should you sit? Because most of the people, these days they're stuck on a chair and just looking at computer. That's how we are operating our life.
So I do have a good answer for this. And if I may, it's two-pronged. So first of all, we're not designed to sit all the time. We really are not designed to sit all the time. So if your job means that you have to be at a computer a lot, please put a timer on your phone. Mobile, and get up every half an hour. Every half an hour, and just circle your pelvis. Or if you're going to make a cup of tea, when you're boiling the kettle, circle your pelvis around and loosen your hip joints. So you know how Elvis Presley did the rock and roll? Just do that. So you rock and roll. So you're loosening the big rotator muscles around the hip joints. And when you're doing this, when you're circling the pelvis, we get good vascular flow around the pelvic organs. So this can be really helpful. And the other thing is just doing a lunge. Use your chair. Do a lunge so that you're doing the opposite of sitting. So when we sit, we are tightening these psoas muscles, the hip flexors. So give yourself a lunge so that we open the hip flexors up.
We're stretching.
And obviously, give yourself a stretch from side to side, but just move in a way that is circular, so that you're lubricating the joints, and so that you're kind of undoing a little bit of the stiffness that you get from sitting.
So you get some more circulation also there, blood circulation.
I call it the tea break twist and twirl. So
I watched your Instagram video for that.
Did you? Oh, well done you. So yeah. So the other thing, just to get yourself in good alignment when you're sitting, remembering that when we're standing, good alignment means the ears sit on top of the shoulders, sit on top of the diaphragm, sit on top of the hips, on top of the knees, and on top of the ankles. So there's like a drop line through your body. So we avoid the rolling the shoulders, putting the head forward. We avoid the pelvis pushing forward like so. And we avoid this as well. So some people, not many these days, but some people overarch the back and lift the rib cage. Yeah, that sort of soldier stance. And that also destabilizes your core. And it puts us in that fight and flight state when we're with our head up. So really important. I always call it the, imagine you have been lifted up by a mother cat. If you're a kitten, it's kitten neck. So imagine you're being lifted up by the scruff of the neck. It brings the chin in and it just aligns the head on top of the rest of the body. So that's a really easy cue. And the other one is to, rather than just push your shoulders back because they fall forward, roll one shoulder up, slide it down, and then roll the other shoulder up and slide it down. And they tend to sit in their sockets and stay there if you do one at a time. Whereas if you just go like that, they fall forward again. Now, when you're sitting, whether you're in your car or whether you're at your desk, this is the trick. Put your bum to the back of your chair so that your pelvic floor, your tail is untucked and your pelvic floor is lengthened out. So you start by that, and then can you see that there's a big gap here? If you just have I've got quite a big blanket here, but like a scarf or a small hand towel, and you roll it up, what you want to do is start by that feeling of lifting up like a mother cat has lifted you up here. So the chin comes in, the bottom of your nose is parallel with the ground. Do your shoulder roll, and then imagine you have weights at the base of your shoulders that are just kind of sliding your shoulders down your back. And that movement immediately puts my diaphragm on top of my pelvic floor diaphragm. So these guys are now talking to each other. Now I just put this behind where my bra strap is, so my shoulders can just sit onto that bit of prop. It's not down here, lumbar, which is a lot of car things will put you, but that just makes me do that. So it's higher. It's there at your shoulders. Now I'm not doing, there's no effort, but I can feel that my deep core muscles are very gently switched on. I can breathe well, my shoulders are back, and I can be typing away or driving away, and I can sustain this posture. And this is the posture, if you are sitting and doing Kegel exercises, you want to be here, because now I can breathe, I can do my Kegel exercise, I can release, and I'm actually getting proper vascular flow around the pelvic floor. If I'm like this, sitting in my car at the red lights going, well, I might do a pelvic floor exercise now, all I'm doing is creating tension around the anus in particular, and I'm going to cause myself constipation, difficulty eliminating, possible prolapse, tension, pain with sex, all of these things.
So many things.
So many things. So yeah, sitting well, standing well. And the other thing is realizing, really working with that relationship between your diaphragm, your breathing diaphragm, and your pelvic floor diaphragm. So that, and just really understanding that. So knowing that you get a natural lift through your pelvic floor when you breathe out. So if you're going with a little bit of constriction by pursing your lips, or if you're a yogi and you know the Ujjayi breath, if you've got that little constriction on the back of your throat and breathing in and out of your nostrils, on the out breath, we're getting a natural lift through our pelvic floor. So if we're going from sit to stand, which, you know, with gravity going from sit to stand, our organs and our intestines, all of the stuff that's in that canister are about 20 pounds of weight. So it's a significant amount of weight. So when we're going from sit to stand, all of that weight is with gravity going downwards as we're going up. Now, if your pelvic floor is all weakened and scrunched, then all of that pressure down over time can cause prolapse, can cause problems. So what we want to do is, if we're going from sit to stand, or if we're lifting up something heavy, or if we're about to sneeze, or about to cough, or about to land down, what we want to do is make sure we're breathing out as we do the action. Yeah. And it's helpful to do a little mini contraction through your pelvic floor just before the pressure down. So the easiest thing is to focus around stopping yourself passing wind, that sensation around the anus, because that's where we have most of our pelvic floor muscles, about 70% at the back, only about 30% at the front. So it's a lot easier to focus on the back. And just before you go from sit to stand, just before you cough, or sneeze, or just before you lift something heavy, you do that action, you breathe out, and then obviously when you finished going from sit to stand, or you finish lifting something heavy, do a conscious release of the pelvic floor muscles. So let them go. Imagine those sitting bones are spreading apart, the pubic bone and tailbone are spreading apart. Lay that diamond shape out so it's nice and relaxed.
So you should be relaxed, you know, when you're getting up. It's like that.
So if you're going from sit to stand, you want to contract and lift as you're going from sit to stand. Once you're up there, you don't want to be walking around or lifted. You want to then relax your pelvic floor muscles. Yeah. If you're lifting a big heavy basket of washing, for example, and you bend your knees and you put your bum behind you so your bottom muscles can do the work, not your lower back. And as you come up, you breathe out. And you might also want to do a lift through the anus as well as you're coming up with that heavy thing. And then once you put it down, just make sure you relax your pelvic floor muscles. Don't go around for the next half an hour all tight in your pelvic floor. That's a lot of information.
Yeah, it's a lot of information, but it's a good information. I mean, we should know. We should be knowing that, you know, doing so many things we are doing in our life, but we are not aware of what we are doing. So just be mindful when we have this knowledge.
And once you've become, this is called the knack. And once it becomes a habit, you don't even think about it. And this is why it's so important we learn it when we're younger, because statistically, many women, in fact, almost most women go into nursing homes because of incontinence issues. And yes, it's common, but it's not normal. It's not physiologically normal. We don't need to be a statistic. So if you learn this stuff when you're younger, you're going to have a much, you know, actually, I was going to say you're much less likely to need to go into a nursing home because of incontinence issues.
For example, I have two daughters, and one of my daughters, she is most of the time sitting on computer when she comes back from school. And I don't like her posture, but she doesn't listen. So I'm just wondering if there is any program or anything, you know, where or a video, you know, I can just show her and I will ask her to watch it and she can learn something from there, you know, because she doesn't listen to me. So
can I tell you what will work? You do it for yourself, and she will learn so much more from watching her mum look after herself and explain what you're doing. If you give her a video, she's not going to watch a video. She knows she's a teenager. But if over time she sees that you are doing work to help yourself, and you say it's because I don't want to be in a nursing home with incontinence, you know, and these are issues that we've all got to talk about and we've got to do something about. You don't try and tell her what to do, but you just let her see you doing all the things that are going to help you in perimenopause. Long term, that's going to have so much more impact. It really is. Kids learn from what they see in action, not from what they're told. So that's
Yeah.
my advice.
Okay.
Focus on you, and she will, you know, once she sees your posture changing, once she sees you doing these little things with how you sit, once she sees you getting up, you know, with an alarm on your phone and just moving and stretching without telling her what to do, you're just doing it for yourself. She's going to go, huh, that's interesting. She's going to notice how you start changing. You're going to talk about how you start changing, and then she will.
Time for me to change.
Yes.
For me to change for her and for myself. I think first for myself.
Yeah,
So,
I really believe as parents we've got to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you are giving us some amazing offer, which is part of our VIP package.
Yes.
So what is that?
So for your VIP ladies, I've got a woman's wellbeing toolkit, which is just 5 videos of explanation of kind of some of the stuff that I've talked about today, but making it, you know, shorter and so people can understand. And then also some videos of practical exercises. So you can just follow me that are going to help women to release built up tension. So we get those muscles that are contracted to lengthen and release, to learn to breathe properly with those releases. Tricks which I again think every woman should know about, how to release all the tension from our upper body, which then correlates with releasing tension through the rest of the body. Little tricks which are very powerful, and then also exercises and a yoga sequence that helps you to strengthen not just the pelvic floor, but all of the incredibly important muscles around the pelvis that stabilize the pelvic floor. They're very, very integral muscles around the pelvic area. And there's a video also to help strengthen the muscles that will help you get into good posture. So yeah, so that's
I think it's yeah, I will say it's more than, I think it's more than I mean, it's worth more than money. I mean, what you're contributing. And
I always say your health is your wealth, and you know what you invest in time and money, but you know, it's time now will pay dividends for the rest of your life. Nobody, you know, is sitting in a nursing home going, oh yay, I've got such a great pension plan, if they're wetting themselves. No. Focus on your health, focus on your mental health, your physical health, and everything else will follow afterwards. That's when you can shine, when you feel good in your body, when you feel clear in your mind.
Yeah. So thank you, Linda. And I must say that I really enjoy talking to you and learning about something, you know, which carries a lot of value for me in my life. And I'm going to implement some of the strategies you shared today. And you know, I hope that whoever is going to watch this video will do the same. So thank you so much for coming over and enriching our lives. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Listen, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed being here.